Hey everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today's guest is Tiffany Franklin. Tiffany, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to the guest, and we'll get right into why we're talking.
Hi, Chris. Nice to meet everyone. I am an executive career coach. I own TJF Career Coaching. I've worked at career centers at Vanderbilt, University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, been a recruiter in the past, and now I'm focusing full time on executive career coaching.
Fantastic. Do you remember how we met?
Back in 2007, I was working for Vanderbilt as an employee. Sorry, can you edit that out? Sorry.
Nope, it all
As
stays in. All the mistakes.
as an employer relations manager for the career services. And part of my job was to travel around the country, meeting alumni, doing really cool things. And when I was doing some research, I came across you and what you were doing at Yahoo. So I said, hey, when I'm out there, I sent you an email to see if you'd be willing to meet for coffee. And you invited me to the campus, and I got to see you in action and just see what Yahoo looked like, and it was amazing.
And how often had you contacted people and not heard back?
You know, it was interesting in that particular situation. I wasn't necessarily contacting people like, hey, can I get a job? I was trying to facilitate connections to help other people, being the students at Vanderbilt jobs. So, luckily, a lot of people would get back to me, but I did a very targeted, soft ask, so to speak. I would say, okay, I'm going to this city. These are some of the companies that I'm interested in. And I'd send out quick little messages on LinkedIn, even way back then when it was still pretty new. And I would say of every 10 messages I would send, probably about six people would get back to me. But
It's
I will
worse
say,
now. It's worse now. I'm going to guess it would be worse now, but back then, the just having that affinity,
Mhm.
the Vanderbilt connection. I loved Vanderbilt, so much. My time at Vanderbilt was transformative. And so for to hear from you, I got excited, and to be able to start that dialogue. And I think at that point I started speaking at the school. I did, at the career center, to the students, and then it just kept getting more. You would come up with a new program, and you would ask me to get involved, and one of which, and I remember sending you a note 5 years ago, this coming July, on Judson Lancina's 1 year, 5 year anniversary with us, because he was our first employee here in Nashville. We now have over 200 people here in Nashville, and 400 some people affiliated with the firm, employees and contractors spread out throughout the country, and now we're global. But Nashville is our headquarters. So because of us connecting at Yahoo in 2007, I've had that connection that we made impacted the trajectory of IQTalent partners, and has ultimately, you get to take full credit for making that connection to Judson, because I remember thanking you for it, and I said you had everything to do with making that happen. But it was a program you came up with called Skype's the Limit. You were a born marketer. And it was just to connect a recent alum with a more established alum, to where I would coach that person on his or her job search, and you aligned me with Judson. And I remember him being 10 minutes late, and I texted you, have I told you the remainder of the story?
No, I don't think you
Turns out
have.
he was still asleep, and you woke him up. And so he jumped on the call, and the big joke is that he is always 10 minutes late to everything. He's not, it's a joke. But yeah, that was within 30 minutes of meeting Judson over Skype. He mentioned that he wanted to be a recruiter. I asked him why. We're terrible humans, and I made that joke, and he says, but I don't want to be like those recruiters. I want to solve problems. And I wish that was a paraphrasing. No, that is almost an exact statement of what he said. I sent him an agreement to join IQTP from that point, that day, and he was working on one of our clients, later that afternoon. So because of that connection, and then in 2012, you and I had a 5 year relationship by that point, and I was we had gotten together here in Nashville. But because of that connection in 2007, it enabled what an impactful person on my life, on my company 5 years later. So you get to take full credit.
Oh my gosh, you give me way too much credit, Chris. And I have to say thank you to you and how you've impacted my life, because I was scared when I was first reaching out to people. I always considered myself a shy person, but yet I was a psychology major because I do like to connect with people. It's just sometimes the process would scare me. And I remember as I was sending these emails out, you were one of the first people that got back to me. And the way that you did it was just so genuine and so friendly. And I could tell you really wanted to help people and you were excited to do so. And I think just that made me relax a little bit about everything. And then when I saw you in person, I thought, wow, I really love this job. So it helped me do my job better just because you made that connection. And then later, whenever I had a program and you were so excited to get on board, it's funny there, Pat Flynn he runs that site, Smart Passive Income, and he talks about super fans. But it's funny, I feel like you're the super connector, and you're one of those that you make it easy for people to connect with you. And I think that's one of those things in networking. If you think about it, oh, it's big, bad networking, I have to do this, it's scary. That's what a lot of people, I think the misconception is. But if you just think like Lauren Oberstadt of Vanderbilt Alumni Relations said, it's being interested and interesting. And you've always done that. And I think that just makes the connection so much easier.
Oh, my daughter would tell you I'm boring. Just kidding. I'm still the fun dad for now. We'll see what happens as she gets closer to 12. But it all comes down to value. And I don't mean that in monetary value. Are you going to provide value to this person's life, to this person's whatever their goal is? And if their goal is to network, and you need and get connected to other people, get connected to ideas, get connected to information. By the way, every time I say connected, take a drink of your coffee or your alcoholic beverage.
I got my signature unsweetened iced tea here.
It looks like vodka. But the thing is, when I talk about networking, when I talk about cold calling, whether it's cold calling or applying for a job, I always say, are you clear about why you want something? Are clear about what you're looking for from that connection? Because if you're not clear, if you're just calling someone hoping to figure it out, they're going to be less likely to respond. They're going to respond, but you're not going to get the result that you want. So you have to be clear about why you're calling or what you're looking for. So when you reached out, you said the goal was to connect and see how we might be able to help the students. It was about that. It wasn't necessarily me providing value to you. It was providing value to an audience that you care deeply about and hoped that I would care just as deeply. So that's the value that I find in networking, and why I often respond to the spammers, the spam artists that are on LinkedIn. I will often, if they're interesting, if they're clear about what they want, and it's clear that they looked up who I was and understood a problem that I'm having or communicated or they assume I might have based on what they see in my profile, I'm going to respond. And because they took the time to not just bulk message me, they took the time to personalize things, look at what I do, how I do it, why I do it, and where they play in. Do I always pull the trigger on whatever service? No, but have I? Yes.
I do the same thing. I mean, at heart, I'm a professional matchmaker. But instead of in romantic relationships, it's people professionally. I love when I can connect people just like you and Judson that day, or how you've connected me with so many people over the years, because I think that's when we set ourselves up for serendipity. You just never know basically what can come from those connections, and thinking of maybe somebody is looking for something and they talk to somebody like, oh my gosh. But to your point, yes, that is so true about people needing to know how to help people help them. Because I tell people, flip the script. If somebody just tells you, I need a job. Well, first of all, that's just, you can't tell people that. That's going to be way too, that just shuts the conversation down. But also, so many follow-up questions. But if you just give people a soft ask, I think I'm interested or I'm interested in marketing. I see that you're doing this and that. I would love to hear about your journey and just any advice you have. That way, you're not asking for a job, but you are asking about their experience. People tend to love talking about themselves. I also think culture is an amazing thing to ask about, because sure, you can look up a lot of stuff about companies on their website, but hearing somebody's perspective on what the culture is like can be so telling. And that can really, even if they're not the one getting you the job, the insights you get can help you in the interviews.
Well, and so there, I have a question for you, and it's going to kind of maybe get into the philosophical. Those types of things are that you just described are very easy for empathetic people to understand, but not everybody's an empathetic person, or they may not be as empathetic as, say I am. Like, I meet somebody and I'm immediately like, if they're crying, I'm crying. If they're
Right.
happy,
Me
I'm
too.
happy. If they're upset, I run away. But how do what are some of the what's some of the advice you give to the people that you're coaching that may not have the skill set to read the room or to understand those things? What are some of what's some of the advice that you provide them so that they can more easily discern an affinity or something in common, or some way to quickly identify common ground if they're not if they're not a complete empath?
Well, I think one of the things is it depends on the circumstances in which you're connecting with somebody. So if you're the one initiating outreach through LinkedIn, or if somebody says, I have this person I want to introduce you to, do your research before you actually connect with them. Look at their LinkedIn, look at where they went to school, and then cross reference. So for instance, Vanderbilt, they may call it something different now, but it was Door to Door Forever, Commodore Connections, whatever the alumni database is for your university. They will have very in-depth information in there, and people may even say what dorm they were in. Or you can look at what they've been tweeting about. However, there is a fine line in research and stalking. So you don't want to freak somebody out by saying, oh, Fluffy looks really great, and I love that picture, that outfit you had
Yeah,
on in
don't be
Hawaii
creepy.
last
Yeah,
week. Yeah,
don't be creepy.
don't be
And
creepy.
actually, and this is something I think you and I have been talking about, for the over the decade plus that we've known each other. 15 years we've known each other.
Oh my gosh.
But no, I've always said, if you are collect all the data, do all the research, you can find the affinity if you're not able to really quickly adapt and read the room. So I always tell them, be prepared ahead of time so that you know what to bring up. But again, don't memorize the number of children they have. Don't memorize their address if you happen to find it. I mean, there have been times where I've, as an executive recruiter, I've done research into a candidate before I've had a conversation, and I had found this one gentleman and I just did a Google search, and I was just trying to find more information. And it turns out like there was a website that he was a part of that accidentally made all of his license plates of all of the cars that he had collected over the years, his driver's license number, um, all this very personal information
That's
had accidentally
terrifying.
been made public. And so I said, hey, I wanted to make sure this was before, this is when LinkedIn was still in its nascent phase. He wasn't on LinkedIn, but I'd managed to find him on like Zoom Info or some other resource. And we were talking, and I said, before we go into any further, I just wanted to kind of learn more about you and see if there were any other bios or articles about you. I found a link to some information that you would probably want to have taken down and removed from the Google cache, shared it with him, and he was so appreciative of that. And so I was able to help him,
Yeah,
in my due
identity theft.
diligence.
Help them prevent that. Oh
Yeah,
my
but it's still like
gosh.
there was a lot of creepy information on there that I could have leveraged.
So what I use as a rule of thumb, if something you find is on LinkedIn, it's fair to say it. So for instance, if I'm about to meet with somebody and on their LinkedIn profile, I see that they once worked in a company in Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta, so I may say, and not the first thing, but during the conversation, I looked at your LinkedIn profile before we connected and I see that you worked at so and so. I was in Atlanta, we used to live near Roswell. And just, sometimes that can be a good conversation starter. Other things to kind of help people who reading the room isn't natural is you don't want to keep it too long. If people are, you don't want to have one word answers, but ask questions, be interested in people, but actually listen to their responses. Don't just think about what you're going to say next. So for instance, if you're going to talk to somebody, maybe prepare some questions ahead of time just to help you if you forget. But by the same token, don't be so solid on those questions that you're like a robot that must ask them, because you want things to be able to flow. Remember, this is a conversation. It's like a tennis match going back and forth.
You don't want to over prepare. And so you might have 20 questions that you as a recruiter are asking, or as a candidate, you might pull up, but you don't, if they've already been, asked and answered, in different ways, don't ask it again. Sometimes when you ask one question, it'll lead to a discussion, but just because you haven't actually asked that question, you've already got the answer. Don't ask it again. Otherwise it looks like you haven't been paying attention. Don't check a box just for the sake of checking a box.
And I think be flexible too. So if in the middle you hear their kids are crying or the dog or the doorbell rings, go with the flow. At some points, or maybe something comes up on their other phone and they have to go with a client, say, it sounds like you have a lot going on. Is this still a good time? Because I'm happy to reschedule if that would be better for you. Or, when you are scheduling the call, I usually try and keep it short, maybe 15 minutes or so. I let them take the lead. And then when we first get on, I always say, I really appreciate your time. Is this still a good time for you? And because all our lives are so crazy. And just if they say no, don't take something personally. Everybody's balancing so much, and just you'll find another time. A lot of times people, they have the Calendly, so you can just go back up there on their calendar and get a better time. Or even if you're supposed to have an hour, if something else comes up, just be grateful for the time. And like Chris said, as you go through those questions that you prepared, I like to rank order them. So maybe I only get to ask two, but I asked the two that were most important to me.
Yeah, and again, that comes down to preparation. So even if you are able to kind of think on the fly, still always a good idea to prepare in advance so that you, one, come across as knowledgeable in what, and that why you're calling, or the subject matter, but you also come across as more confident, if you're prepared. But if you over prepare, you can sound like a automaton, just a Siri, reading back questions or your text. And so if you sound like you're scripted, it's not going to come across as genuine or authentic. And one of the things that I actually went to a recruiting conference once, and we were talking about our icebreakers. And a lot of people's icebreakers, had to do with noticing where somebody's from or finding that affinity. If you don't have that, I actually use this one, and actually a couple of my employees and friends have since stolen it. When somebody asks me how I'm doing, my response is, I'm staying out of trouble. And the answers there's a handful of stock answers that I get to that, and it will determine how the conversation is going to go. If somebody says, oh, that's good, you don't want to get in trouble, then I know the number of jokes I'm going to tell, the lightheartedness, the colloquialism, isms that I'll throw out there. Done, straight up professional, to the point. And then you get the people, oh, that's good. And then but then I can have like a little joke, be a little jokey with them. And then there are the people like, where's the fun in that? And then I know with that conversation, I can go be, a bit more overt in being friendly, jokey, and it's going to have more fun. So I wouldn't recommend everyone use that. You got to make sure the delivery is great. Because if the delivery is off at all, you can sound weird. But
That's a fun one. I think my answer would depend if we're talking now or if I see like a Satco on the porch and it's like, okay.
I find that that's a way to put people at ease. One that, I know who they are. It gives me an opportunity to kind of know who they are and what kind of conversation I can have. So then I'm not putting somebody in an awkward position to listen to me tell bad dad jokes. It's just strictly business on those calls, or a little joke here and there, and then there's the pure infotainment, conversations. What are some other ways that, people can improve the longevity of their conversation, of their connections? So you and I, we met over email, cold email. We've now known each other 15 years. I'm going to keep saying that because I like to age myself. So how do you, now that you've made them, you've reached out to make a connection, you've made the connection, now how do you maintain and grow that connection?
Okay, so one of the things I think is, you don't have this expectation, but a lot of times I've been lucky for people like yourself that they've become my friends over the years. So, and not every professional networking connection, of course, is going to be a friend. Some will always stay just an associate or colleague or just somebody you've met, but you keep in touch with once in a while. But I have found every couple months, especially around the holidays. And again, it doesn't have to be a denominational thing. You can just send a generic holiday card like happy holidays, or maybe reach out.
Where you procrastinated and you're going to procrastinate, so you send Happy New Year's cards.
Yes.
Which is what we do.
Yes, thank you for calling me out on that. I have so done that before, which this year I just ran out of time. So I did send some holiday cards, but the ones that I really wanted to write more. So actually, if you got a holiday card for me that was a Happy New Year one, that means I wrote more, because the others I was just doing the Happy Holidays. I'll send this off.
So all of you listening in that got that card, it means Tiffany doesn't value you enough to send you a good card.
Yeah, Chris, whatever. No, yes, you're seeing my card writing habits. But the one card I always send right away is a thank you card. So first of all, and that can be a thank you email, of course, but in this day and age, right after you connect with somebody, thank them for their time, thank them for the advice, and just send that I like to send it the same day or at least within 24 hours, because somebody took their time. But getting back to, so what does that look like over time? People's birthdays. That's a big thing I like, because a lot of these people you connect on LinkedIn, and then when it's their birthday, if that comes up and you get that little notification, send them a little note and say, happy birthday. I hope things are going well in your world. I would love to catch up soon. Or if there was something that you talked about, say it was a big event, or maybe a time around a holiday, or they had something big, you see on LinkedIn that they started a new job or something else happens. I use those LinkedIn updates as reminders to touch base.
Yeah. And on the thank you note, I get asked that question whenever I coach, job seekers myself. Should I send a thank you note? And the answer always is, if you're grateful for the opportunity, send a note. If it's time sensitive, send an email. If you have time, send a handwritten card. I have seen them make a difference in a recruiting opportunity, in a recruiting setting. We had two candidates. It was a coin toss, which one to go with. And we had started, the hiring manager made her decision, and we started the process of going down the path with candidate A. We hadn't reached out to the candidate yet, but we'd started the paperwork and started kicking off the process of getting an offer letter together. Candidate B's thank you card came through, and the hiring manager changed her mind.
Wow, that's powerful.
So I've seen that happen, and I have only received around a dozen thank you notes in 22 years.
Are
you
you
know,
serious? Oh my gosh, in career
the
services,
handwritten thank you notes
we used
from
to get them a
candidates.
lot. See, I do both if it's something I really want. I do the email within 12 hours because sometimes they make their decisions very quickly
Mhm.
and I want to get it in. And especially many of my clients, they work in tech and just everything. But then I will do the card right after that. So that way it's both. It's one of those that if it comes, they get something before they make a decision, but then they have the more formal note from me afterwards.
I still have every thank you card that's ever been sent to me by a candidate.
Me too.
Yeah, but I've only got 12. But I have them, and it's impact because it was impactful. It was something that I really valued, and so I've kept them. And so when I tell people, it's really it's a personal choice. I don't say it's not a requirement that you send a thank you note, but it's highly encouraged and can be highly impactful, on the decision making of it can actually give you some extra points, towards getting the offer.
I know a lot of stuff that we're doing right now, of course, is virtual just because it makes it easier and we have to right now with the pandemic still lingering. But when things are going to in person, there's some tips too. If you are, meeting somebody for an informational interview where they're going to give you some advice, then and it's at a coffee shop, please be the one to pick up the tab. If you've been the one to invite them and they're helping you, that's just something that you've invited them, they're taking their time, you can buy them a cup of coffee.
If they and if they insist upon paying, decline one time. Just say no, I've got this. And if they insist, don't argue. Then you let them pay. But you need
Yes.
to you need to try to insist, because I've seen that was played on me,
Mhm.
and it just made me appreciate that person not continuing to insist,
Yeah, you
because
don't want
when
to
they
get
continue to
contentious.
insist, it's like that's just weird.
It gets into
um
a power play almost. It's weird. So I
it's
like
just,
how
yeah,
you
just
said,
read the room. And again, I relented after my second attempt to cover the cost. So I backed down.
and just
um
say genuinely, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
yeah. And the other part about maintaining relationships is taking their call. Like when you get a call from someone that provided, that you reached out to and built the connection with, and like there's a candidate, um he was probably the best candidate I could never place at Yahoo. And it was a toss up between him and someone else for this role. But I still think that, he was a phenomenal candidate, phenomenal person. We became friends. We've known each other now, over 15 years. Pardon me. He
That's
was
your
one of the
magic
first.
number.
Yeah, it seems like it. But this is going back to it was probably been
Yahoo
16
days.
years, because it was when I was first at Yahoo. And fast forward, he ends up moving back to Belgium, where he was from. And he reconnected with his high school sweetheart, and they were getting married. And my wife and I were had delayed our honeymoon until our daughter was a year. We kind of wanted to kind of wait, and we were going to leave her at home, but she ended up going
Oh, how
with us.
fun.
And so Ella was in his wedding. She carried some handfuls of flowers, and so I was there to be, his, best man, and I gave a speech and all that. And so this is somebody I was unsuccessful at placing at Yahoo, but I coached him through all of his interviews for most of the jobs that he's had since. And we just, by being there for him when he needed the help, when he needed advice, or just wanted to say hi, I was available. And if I wasn't available right when he called, I said when I would be available. And it's because and also because of him, I've met so many other great executives. Same thing with my buddy Tom Owen. Tom and I, have gotten to know each other as another candidate from Yahoo. I couldn't place, but we've maintained our friendship, and we've coached each other, guided each other, given each other advice. But we respond. Or if we can't respond right away, like to connect, we say when we can connect.
That's such great advice. And what I love about that is I think it underscores that sometimes no's could be not right now, or it could just be an important, almost like a breadcrumb on your journey that, I've had play when I was a recruiter. I had some candidates that inevitably they would reach out to me the day after we signed an offer for somebody else. But then I knew those roles would come back up. And some of them I would be able to get them early in the pipeline for the next role like that. Or to your point, maybe it didn't work out, but then we stayed in touch and we were able to facilitate connections for each other later. So I think sometimes job seekers, it can be such a roller coaster of emotions, the up, the down, and they take every little thing where it just seems like, oh, wow, I'm just frustrated. This is never going to work out. And then you realize that, well, it's maybe not working out with this particular thing at this particular time, but what did you learn from that? Or who did you meet? Or, it's setting yourself up for something good to come along. It just may be a couple weeks away.
That's a great way to end. Um, that is awesome. So, Tiffany, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast today. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do your shameless plug, and then we'll get going.
Well, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. If anybody needs help with any career coaching, I work with those of all ages, from college students through executives and everybody in between. I do resume overhauls for people, LinkedIn, and I love doing mock interviews and everything. So you can check it out at tjfcareercoach.com. And also, if you want to email me, it's tiffany@tjfcareercoach.com.
And you can also be found on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure to put your link to your LinkedIn and the link to your website from the summary page for the podcast. And I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you, Tiffany. Thanks for listening. And if you have any feedback or comments, please provide them. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, don't hesitate to connect. And thanks, everyone.